The world that never fit in your pocket, our world, the baseline. You're reading this on a device that didn't exist 20 years ago. A rectangle of glass and metal that contains your bank, your social life, your navigation, your entertainment, your work, and increasingly, your identity. In 2007, when Steve Jobs unveiled the iPhone, he called it 3 devices in one: a phone, an iPod, and an internet communicator. He had no idea he was describing the last moment before humanity fundamentally reorganized itself around a screen you could hold in one hand. By 2010, there were apps for everything. By 2015, there were entire industries that existed only because of smartphones. By 2020, during a global pandemic, these devices became the lifeline that kept society functioning while people stayed home. Today, in 2026, the average person checks their smartphone 144 times per day. We navigate by it, date by it, bank by it, work by it. Children growing up now cannot remember a world where every answer, every connection, every distraction wasn't immediately available in their parents' pockets. This is the world we know, but what if it had never happened? The Divergence Point, January 9, 2007. Steve Jobs takes the stage at Macworld in San Francisco. He's thinner than usual. The pancreatic cancer he doesn't know he has is already working. In our timeline, he unveils the iPhone. In this timeline, the demonstration fails. Not spectacularly. Not in a way that makes headlines. The multi-touch interface, built on years of secretive development, simply doesn't work reliably on stage. The phone freezes. The pinch-to-zoom gesture that would become iconic instead becomes a punchline. Jobs, visibly frustrated, tries to recover, but the damage is done. The prototype works in the lab. But the manufacturing process Apple rushed to meet the announcement deadline has created units too inconsistent for mass production. Apple delays the iPhone indefinitely. 6 months later, Jobs takes medical leave. He never returns. Without his singular obsession driving the project forward, Apple's board, already nervous about diversifying away from iPods and computers, quietly shelves the troubled smartphone program. The technology exists, but the moment passes. Other companies are working on similar devices. But without Apple's successful launch to prove the market, they remain cautious. BlackBerry continues to dominate business users with keyboards. Nokia owns the global phone market. Palm's devices are too niche. Google's Android project, created specifically to compete with the iPhone, loses momentum and pivots to tablets and netbooks instead. The smartphone revolution never happens. Not because it was impossible, the technology was there, but because no one took the leap when it mattered. First adaptations, 2007-2015. At first, people don't notice what they're missing because they never knew to expect it. Phones get incrementally better. They take photos, play music, browse simplified web pages, but the experience remains clunky. Physical keyboards, styluses, resistive touchscreens that require pressure. Most people still see their phone as a phone that happens to do other things, not a computer that happens to make calls. The real internet lives on computers. Laptops get lighter, faster, cheaper. Wi-Fi becomes ubiquitous. By 2010, nearly every coffee shop, library, and restaurant offers wireless internet. People carry laptops in bags or use public computers. College students still go to computer labs. Libraries remain essential community infrastructure. Social media evolves differently. Facebook grows. But without mobile apps to enable constant connection, it remains something you check when you sit down at a computer, like email once was. MySpace actually survives longer, adapting to desktop use. Twitter launches, but never explodes into cultural dominance because the spontaneity of mobile posting doesn't exist. Instagram is never created because its entire premise, instant photo sharing from anywhere, makes no sense without cameras in everyone's pockets. Photography fragments. Digital cameras remain popular, People still take pictures, but they're more deliberate about it. You bring your camera when you plan to take photos. The idea of photographing your lunch seems absurd because you can't instantly share it with anyone. Without a feed to perform for, photography becomes personal again. Parents still take thousands of photos of their children, but they live on memory cards and hard drives, organized into folders, occasionally printed. The phrase "pics" or "it didn't happen" is never coined. Navigation happens differently. People print MapQuest directions before trips. GPS devices, Garmin, TomTom, remain a separate product category and sell millions of units annually. Paper maps experience a minor renaissance among younger people who find vintage appeal in their tangibility. Getting lost is still a common experience. So is asking strangers for directions. Young people develop different social patterns. Without texting being free and unlimited, they still call each other. Without social media profiles to maintain, they gather in person more often. Teenage social hierarchies still exist, but they play out in physical spaces, school, malls, parks, not in Instagram comments or Snapchat streaks. Bullying still happens, but it ends when you go home. The cascade begins 2015 to 2025. The absence of smartphones creates a world that looks surprisingly similar in big ways, but fundamentally different in texture and rhythm. Cities evolve differently. Without everyone staring at phones while walking, street-level retail adapts to catch the eye of pedestrians who are actually looking around. Window displays become more elaborate. Street performers thrive. Small businesses rely more on location and foot traffic than online reviews. The dead mall phenomenon is less severe because malls remain social gathering spaces, not just places to buy things you could get on your phone. Without Uber and Lyft, which only made sense with smartphones for hailing and payment, the taxi industry never faces disruption. Cities maintain and modernize their cab systems. Public transportation remains better funded because it's the primary alternative to driving. Traffic patterns are different too. Without GPS apps routing millions of drivers down residential streets to avoid congestion, neighborhoods stay quieter. The gig economy never materializes. Without app-based platforms, there's no DoorDash, no Instacart, no TaskRabbit. Food delivery remains limited to pizza places and Chinese restaurants with their own drivers. Grocery shopping is something people do themselves. This means more stable employment for delivery drivers, but fewer options for people with mobility issues. The trade-off is invisible because no one knows what they're missing. Communication remains asynchronous. Email is still the dominant form of written communication. People check it a few times a day on computers. Text messages exist, but are limited and intentional. You don't carry on conversations via text. Group chats are limited to online forums and email chains. The expectation of immediate response never develops. When someone doesn't reply for hours, no one assumes they're being ignored. They're just not at a computer. This has profound psychological effects. Without constant connectivity, people develop longer attention spans. Boredom is still a normal part of life. Waiting rooms, commutes, and lines involve actual waiting. People read more books. Paper newspapers survive longer, and conversation with strangers is more common. The compulsive checking behavior never develops because there's nothing to check. Dating evolves along a different path. Without Tinder and its descendants, online dating remains what it was in 2007. Desktop websites like Match.com and OkCupid that require sitting down and writing detailed profiles. The swipe mechanic never trains people to make split-second judgments based on photos. Meeting people still happens primarily through friends, work, school, and shared activities. Bars and social clubs remain more important. The paradox of choice that comes with infinite options never materializes. Neither does the efficiency of matching with hundreds of potential partners. Relationships form slower but possibly deeper. The 2020 pandemic is devastating in different ways. Without smartphones and their apps, Contact tracing is nearly impossible. Without video calling apps that work on devices everyone already carries, isolation is more complete. Zoom exists, but requires a computer and better internet than many people have. Working from home is possible, only for those with dedicated home offices and laptops. Hospitals can't use apps to screen patients remotely. The death toll is higher, the isolation more profound, the economic damage more severe. But there are unexpected silver linings. Without social media amplifying misinformation instantly to billions, conspiracy theories spread more slowly. Without everyone documenting their pandemic compliance or defiance on Instagram, the social pressure and division are less intense. Without doom scrolling through endless feeds of bad news on a device in bed, people's mental health deteriorates less dramatically. The pandemic is worse in immediate terms, but less psychologically corrosive. The critical moment, the 2024 presidential election. In our world, the 2024 election was fought and won on smartphones through targeted ads, viral videos, text message campaigns, and social media manipulation. In this world, the campaign happens on television, radio, print media, and in-person rallies. Without TikTok, political messages can't go viral among young voters in hours. Without Twitter, politicians can't bypass media filters to speak directly to supporters in real time. Without Facebook's micro-targeting algorithms, campaigns must appeal to broader coalitions rather than narrow interest groups. Without smartphones capturing every gaffe instantly, politicians are less careful but also less performative. The result is messier but more deliberate. Campaigns are expensive because they require buying traditional media and organizing ground operations. Grassroots movements are smaller but more committed because organizing requires actual meetings, not just liking a post. Misinformation still exists, but spreads through email forwards and cable news, not algorithmic amplification. Fact-checking happens in newspapers the next day, not in real-time quote tweets. Voter turnout is lower, especially among young people, because there are no apps gamifying registration and reminding you to vote. But the voters who do show up are more informed, having consumed longer-form journalism rather than headlines scrolled past on a phone screen. Democracy in this world is neither better nor worse, just different. Less participatory, but more deliberative. Less immediate, but more considered. Less transparent, but less performative. Chaburi hard. The world today. A day in the life morning in alternate 2026. Sarah wakes to an alarm clock, an actual device on her nightstand, not her phone. She doesn't check anything immediately because there's nothing to check. Her teenage daughter is still asleep because she's not used to staying up until 2 a.m. on social media. At breakfast, they talk. Not interrupted conversation punctuated by phone checks, but actual discussion about Sarah's daughter's plans with friends. The daughter will call them after school from the family's landline, which most families still have, to coordinate meeting at the mall. They don't need to document the hangout for Instagram. They'll just enjoy it. Sarah drives to work using a dedicated GPS unit mounted on her dashboard. She listens to the radio, which is still a thriving medium, and arrives having heard actual news analysis, not just viral headlines. At red lights, she looks around at other drivers. Some are eating, some singing along to music, some simply thinking. No one is staring down at their lap. At work, Sarah checks her email. 15 messages, all substantive, all requiring thoughtful responses. No Slack notifications constantly fragmenting her attention. No texts from her boss on evenings and weekends. Work happens at work. Home is home. Lunch is with colleagues in the cafeteria. Real conversation without anyone half listening while scrolling. Someone tells a story about getting lost last weekend and stumbling onto a beautiful park they'd never have found following GPS. Everyone laughs. Getting lost is still a shared human experience, not a failure of technology. After work, Sarah stops at a bookstore, which still exists because people still buy physical books and haven't switched entirely to reading on phones during commutes. She browses, talks to a clerk who knows her preferences, and buys 2 novels. She'll read them in bed tonight instead of scrolling through a feed that never ends. Her daughter gets home having spent the afternoon at the mall with friends. She's tired from walking around trying on clothes, eating food court orange chicken, and sitting at a fountain talking for 2 hours. She has no photos to post, no stories to curate, just memories. She seems happy. Over dinner, they discuss a news story Sarah read that day, an in-depth article she actually finished because she wasn't reading it on a phone with notifications pulling her away. Her daughter mentions a video she saw on YouTube, which still exists and thrives on desktop, about climate change. They have a long conversation about it. Before bed, Sarah reads her book for an hour. She falls asleep easily because she hasn't been staring at a bright screen. She doesn't sleep with her phone in the bedroom because phones still live in living rooms and kitchens plugged into walls. That same day, halfway around the world, in Jakarta, a street food vendor makes a living selling noodles from a cart. In our world, his business would require apps for payment, for delivery, for orders. Here, customers walk up, order, eat, and pay cash. It's simpler, but also limiting. He can only serve people who physically come to him. His income is steady, but not growing. In rural India, a farmer checks commodity prices by traveling to town once a week to look at posted boards and talk to other farmers. In our world, smartphone access to market prices has helped millions of small farmers negotiate better deals. In this world, middlemen maintain their information advantage. Development happens more slowly. In Stockholm, a teenager meets her friends at a planned time and place. They don't text to coordinate last-minute changes. They're on time because they have to be. In our world, the fluidity of always-on communication has made people less punctual. Here, reliability is still a valued trait. The reflection, what we take for granted. This world is not better or worse. It's different in ways that ripple through every aspect of human life. Without smartphones, attention became scarce again. The attention economy never fully developed. Advertising still exists, but doesn't follow people everywhere. Marketers can't micro-target based on location and behavior. Privacy erosion happens more slowly. Children grew up differently. Without tablets as digital babysitters, parents struggle more with boredom, but children develop better self-regulation. Without social media during formative years, teen mental health crises are less severe. Suicide rates among young people, which spiked in our world starting around 2010, remained steady. Skills persisted longer. People can still read maps, remember phone numbers, make decisions without crowdsourcing opinions, and tolerate uncertainty. But they also miss out on instantaneous translation, accessibility features, and immediate access to human knowledge. Serendipity survived. Without algorithmic feeds showing you only what you've already expressed interest in, people discover new things by accident more often. Monoculture is less dominant. Niche interests stay niche longer. The long tail is shorter. Loneliness took a different form. Without the illusion of connection through screens, people either make more effort to connect in person or suffer isolation more acutely. There's no middle ground of hundreds of friends you never see. Documentation became selective. Without cameras everywhere, police brutality is harder to prove, but people are also less surveilled. Without everyone filming everything, lived experience isn't constantly mediated through the lens of sharing it later. What this alternate timeline reveals is how contingent our present is. We treat smartphones as inevitable, as the natural result of technological progress. But they required specific decisions, timing, vision, and luck. They solved problems, but created new ones. They connected us and divided us. They made life easier and more complicated. The people in this alternate 2026 don't feel deprived. They can't miss what they never had. They have their own technologies, their own solutions, their own problems. They're not stuck in 2007. They've progressed, just along a different path. When we look at their world, we see our own from the outside. We see what we've normalized that isn't normal. We see what we've sacrificed for convenience. We see what we've gained and what we've lost. Most importantly, we see that the life we're living, connected, distracted, documented, optimized, infinite, exhausting, wasn't inevitable. It was just one possibility. And like all possibilities, it came with trade-offs we're only beginning to understand.